Vivant Behavioral Health has been around the block a few times. You see, they've got a history under multiple names, from Youth Services International to Sequel Care Family and Youth Services. Now it is Vivant Behavioral Health. I want to put a trigger warning up for child abuse, neglect, assault, and death. This video is all in my opinion based on public information I found online. I do want to disclose that I have previously worked in association with Sequel Family and Youth Services several years ago, and is one of the reasons I really wanted to make this video. I don't speak on behalf of the company, but I do speak from my own personal experiences and opinions. I really wanted to work there to hopefully make kids' lives better, and I felt like I was stuck in a perpetual system that didn't care about them, that really didn't care about making these kids' quality of life any better, but just about making themselves money. And that was so frustrating. I guess I should have known when it was a for-profit foster care company. I guess I was just a little naive.
Sequel is far from the only company in the residential treatment industry that's amassed a long list of documented violations. Yet these companies continue to operate. Some, like Sequel, post large profits at the taxpayer's expense. One reason is the chronic shortage of placements for foster kids. Between 2012 and 2017, the number of children in foster care increased by more than 11%, a development partly driven by the opioid crisis. Agencies increasingly resorted to private solutions for traumatized, hard-to-place kids, often hundreds of miles away from their homes.
There have been more and more people coming out and talking about their time with the troubled teen industry and how horrific their experiences were and how little care those adults had over their well-being. Now, kids that are in the foster care system are some of the most vulnerable kids out there. They don't have the same resources that other people do. The fact that people like Jay Ripley, who we're going to be talking about in a little bit, and is the connection between all three of these companies, I don't know how he sleeps at night with this system running to make him money by downgrading the quality of life of kids in the foster care system, in my opinion.
You can make money in this business if you control staffing.
But inadequate staffing, some allege, is what led children here in Columbus to suffer abuse. In 2019, 10 Investigates reported on this lawsuit, where a teenage boy alleged he had been forcibly held down by other teens, viciously assaulted, battered, and raped. The allegation was substantiated by Children's Services. Sequel Pomegranate settled that lawsuit that alleged at the time of multiple sexual attacks on the victim, the one Sequel Pomegranate staffer working that night was occupied by a personal cell phone. Our investigation also found repeated incidents of violence affecting both staffers and teens.
The original company, Youth Services International, was founded in 1990 by Adam Shapiro and Jay Ripley as a for-profit juvenile corrections company. Now, they operated 22 residential and community-based educational and behavioral modification programs across 12 states, serving around 3,000 youths. Two-thirds, about 2,000 of the youths, were enrolled in juvenile justice programs within 8 states. Youth Services International believed they were the only company with a comprehensive strategy for troubled and at-risk youth. They saw themselves as very strategically positioned for continued growth through their expanding infrastructure. An abstract from this 1995 highlights the issues with this privately run correctional facility, as it focuses on Youth Services International, specifically in Maryland, and how Youth Services International was founded by the Jiffy Lube founder. Operates Victor Cullen Academy, paying Maryland $1 annually, but charging $142 per juvenile per day, higher than some nonprofits. Criticism includes profit-driven practices, incarcerating youths far from home, and failing to meet youth needs adequately. The Academy faces contract risks due to operational deficiencies like lack of group meetings, record keeping, and staff training, along with reports of child abuse. Similar problems are also noted in other YSI programs and the wider industry. Now, this is something that seems to have been an issue throughout the troubled teen industry, but it is clear that this is one of those places that has a lot of allegations for how it very cruelly treated those 3,000 youths that were in their program. which apparently they made $142 per day on. Sounds like our incarceration system, doesn't it? Now, the U.S. Department of Justice eventually reached a settlement with Youth Services International in 2003, which involved legal issues pertaining to the treatment and rights of juveniles under their care. The settlement required YSI to implement significant changes to ensure compliance with the Americans with Disability Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. This includes providing approximate auxiliary aids and services to juveniles who are deaf or hard of hearing, ensuring effective communication, and making sure accommodations in various programs and services were offered by their facilities. That is horrifying that they were not taking care of their deaf children. That's just so frustrating. I know they weren't taking care of any of their children, and that's horrific, but it's just so sad to see that they really do seem to do whatever they can to get away with cutting it for a few bucks. This agreement aimed to address and prevent discrimination against individuals with disabilities, ensuring they received equal access to the programs and services provided by YSA operational facilities. That would be the hope, right? The hope is that they would use the Americans with Disability Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Those should not be acts that are so commonly discounted and not cared about by companies. That's really unfortunate and just shows the ableism in our country as well, in my opinion.
This business model is dangerous for kids, but it is also really dangerous for the workers that come in. The pay is very low.
Sarah Gelser is a state senator from Oregon. She's toured sequel facilities in Illinois and Michigan where Oregon children were being sent. She's put a stop to that, and other states like California and Washington are following suit. Gelser says she's expressed concern to sequel leadership earlier this year about how some children were being improperly restrained.
I expressed my fear that if they did not change something, that a youth in their care was going to be seriously injured or was going to die, and that this was a systemic problem. No one deserves the type of treatment that we are talking about.
That's a good reminder that they are children at the end of the day.
They are all children, and they are all children who have experienced some form of trauma.
This Tampa Bay Times article from 2008 highlights how the Florida Department of Corrections eventually decided to sever ties with Youth Services International because of their irresponsibility for caring for teens in lockup and implied significant issues with the company's service. In 2012, there's a Huffington Post article which also discusses the controversies and legal issues surrounding Youth Services International. It highlights various allegations and lawsuits against YSI, including claims of abuse, neglect, and poor living conditions in facilities managed by the company. The article provides examples of staff misconduct, inadequate training, and systematic issues within the facility, which led to multiple lawsuits and public outcry, as it should. As it should. Tons of accusations of mistreatment, physical abuse, inadequate care, and poor living conditions for nearly 2 decades. And then there was finally some termination from some of these contracts from the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice in 2016. The decision followed a whistleblower lawsuit accusing YSI of fabricating documents and neglecting the juveniles in their care. YSI agreed to pay $2 million to the state, and the lawsuit was settled. Well, I'm glad the state got that money, but what about the kids that actively were the ones getting hurt by YSI, in my opinion? It seems like they didn't get anything, just the state. It seems like an improper carriage of justice, in my opinion. By August 13th, 2016, new contractors were to take over the facilities to ensure smooth transition without disrupting services for youth in custody. Now, that is what is supposed to happen. They were saying that this company is no good, we're having issues with them, we can't keep working with them. But part of the founding team for this company goes on to then found another company, just slightly different, so that it can take over similar facilities and similar government contracts and fill that space that their own company just lost. So instead of these contracts being replaced by better people that are caring for the kids more, they either got sold off, the facilities got sold off to different agencies that were doing similar things, or it went specifically to John Jay Ripley's new company, which was Sequel Youth and Family Services. That seems to be a significant factor in their decision to rebrand, or really just for the leaders to found a new company that'll take its place, as well as take some of those original leaders with them.
Clarinda Academy is in remote southwestern Iowa. It's one of dozens of residential facilities run by the for-profit company Sequel Youth and Family Services. Teens are sent here from nearly 24 states, usually by court order. Sometimes they're foster kids with nowhere else to go. Once here, they need permission to leave.
I've never been back there ever since.
Now, former residents are sounding an alarm, telling NBC News what they experienced at Clarinda was abusive. Sequel said it's prohibited by law from discussing individual cases, but called the accusations baseless and unverified.
Now, this is Sequel Youth and Family Services, which they founded in 1989. This is even more clear, in my opinion, considering the documented problems at Sequel Care Youth and Family Services facilities as well. It seems that the issues with the youth care persisted even after the name change. If you have the same founder with the same guiding principles, it's going to be pretty hard to make a completely different company that, instead of hurting kids, 180s and helps them. And it's really sad to see how John Jay Ripley talks about himself and his company and how much money he can make off of this operation. It's disgusting. This guy sucks. I literally hate John Jay Ripley. Please do not go and harass anyone. You should not. If you have any opinions, please put them in the comment section below. Gosh, what kind of person can think the way he does? I don't understand it.
On Alabama's Gulf Coast, Tristan Broderick and his wife Lori are expecting their first child. When they were children, they both spent time in facilities run by Sequel Youth and Family Services, meant to provide therapy and schooling. But they say there was also abuse.
I've seen a lot of stuff that probably shouldn't have went down, as far as staff abusing kids.
If they can get you in a room or in a blind spot where there's no camera, they can sneak in a little punches. But if you're in a room, they'll straight out just beat the hell out you. So.
Did you see that happen to kids?
It's happened to me.
See, Youth Services International and Sequel Youth and Family Services are not the same company, but they're closely related. Sequel was established by the former employee of YSI, specifically John Jay Ripley, who helped found YSI with James Hinman in the early 1990s. Ripley later started Sequel Family Services in 1999, which operated a number of youth residential treatment facilities across the United States. Sounds a little familiar, my man. It's the same man, John Jay Ripley, who delivered a notable speech discussing the dynamics of low cost and high demand in education and services for youth. Ripley's career and insights emphasize the importance of providing affordable for the state, not necessarily quality for the consumer, because the consumer can't say anything because the consumer is a kid, because they're a foster kid and they have no choice but to accept the cards they're dealt. Gosh, I hate this dude. While meeting increased demand, not standards, demand, particularly in sectors like education and youth services, he began his career in finance. Surprise, surprise. Working with companies like Jiffy Lube and Precision Tune. In my opinion, there's clearly a direction he is coming from. It does not seem like he is coming from a place of wanting to improve quality of life as much as it is, how can I make money for me? And that is all my opinion and totally could just be me. But I don't know. Quacks like a duck, walks like a duck. I think you're a duck, my man.
We've documented problems at more than 10 facilities run by Sequel. Are kids safe at your facilities?
I understand your concern with what you've seen with these allegations, and I can assure you that we take every step we can to ensure the safety of the clients and the staff in our care.
Sequel is a for-profit company with more than 40 facilities. States and federal Medicaid dollars pay them to care for kids who often have nowhere else to go. Contracts obtained by NBC News show states pay between $275 and $800 a day per child.
Our operating profit will be somewhere in the $30 to $32 million range.
Jay Ripley is the co-founder of Sequel and still a board member. In a 2015 business school presentation, Ripley described the need to control costs on staffing.
So you have to have enough staffing to have an excellent program, but you can't have too much staffing to eat up your profit.
And it's not just Sequel profiting, it's wealthy investors. In 2017, Altamont Capital Partners, a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm in Palo Alto, bought a controlling stake in Sequel.
What it looks like to people on the outside is that you're a company making money, you've got private equity ownership, and maybe you're sacrificing some of the care that you're supposed to be giving these kids.
As someone who does work for this company and who has had to ask in the past for resources in order to ensure patient safety and quality services, our partners have been great in making sure that we have what we need to invest in that.
In a statement, Altamont said in part, providing capital to build and enhance services is beneficial for everyone involved, and that the firm conducted due diligence prior to our initial investment and are confident that Sequel is one of the best operators in the industry.
I'm definitely very surprised because I don't know where that money would go to. It definitely does not go to the kids.
Tristan and Lori want Alabama's Sequel facilities shut down.
You're pretty much paying people to abuse kids. The state's pretty much paying people to just neglect kids and just do whatever they want, really.
John Jay Ripley has also emphasized the scalability and profitability of his company in various speeches and public statements. During a specific lecture at the University of Baltimore Business School in 2015, Ripley also discussed how controlling staff costs were crucial for profitability. At this time, Sequel Youth and Family Services reported revenues exceeding $200 million, with profits ranging from $30 to $32 million. That is crazy. This profitability was partly achieved by managing staffing levels efficiently, although this approach later drew criticism for contributing to inadequate care and supervision, leading to numerous issues at Sequel facilities. So true, and it's so clear in how it was run because from my personal experience working there was an incredibly high turnover rate. Most people did not last very long. And if they did, they almost had to kind of like zone it all out. I think a lot of people originally went in wanting to help kids. But when upper management is so tight and doesn't really let you, it's just hard and impossible. Especially when you're understaffed all of the time. You're trying to take care of your own mental health too. But at the same time, really care about the people around you. They put you in an impossible situation where how do you be good at your job and also keep your head on straight when they're paying you almost nothing to do it and not giving you the resources you need to take care of these kids.
We have assumed that he was in a restraint and now he's unresponsive.
This is what she later told police.
Initially, I was like, we thought he was just faking.
Cornelius died 2 days later in a hospital.
I'm still angry.
You were his case manager. You knew him.
Yeah.
Megan Fulkerson worked at Lakeside for 2 years. This is her in red walking into the cafeteria when Cornelius was already on the ground.
Unfortunately, if you had asked majority of our staff 6 months prior, we probably could have told you this was going to happen.
Sequel calls Cornelius's death senseless and tragic and says staff did not follow policies and training. Mary Ann Birmingham is Senior Director of Compliance and Quality Management.
The use of restraint is only when there is an imminent or immediate danger to the client themselves or others.
But Fulkerson says excessive restraints were used often.
Even though they say, hey, this is last resort, they didn't necessarily train what your other avenues were. It just seemed like those restraints were your go-to.
3 former employees, including the nurse, were charged with manslaughter. All pleaded not guilty. In a police interview, Zachary Solis said Sequel management initially told him he'd done nothing wrong.
They said everything was straight, nothing was foul, nothing went wrong. We did a good job. We did what we were trained to do.
Sequel says Solis and other staff were swiftly terminated for their participation in the restraint.
Sequel is an agency, a company composed of thousands of people who've committed their lives to helping, some of our most underserved kids.
But Megan Fulkerson says there needs to be change.
I just feel like something needs to come of this. I don't want Cornelius's death to just go away.
Sequel sent NBC News a statement saying that the overwhelming majority of state child-serving agencies in the United States continue to find our services to be essential and operating at or exceeding their highest standards.
Vice News even put out a video that was called "This Company Profits Off the Most Vulnerable Children in the U.S." by More Perfect Union, and it discusses the controversial practices of Youth Services International. It details allegations of abuse, neglect, and poor conditions in the facilities that were managed by YSI. The video highlights the company's profit-driven motives and the negative impacts of the well-being of the juveniles that were in their care. Interviews with the former detainees and the employees provide these firsthand accounts. I really recommend watching it, and I will have it in the description box below. It is an incredible video, and I really think that sharing victim stories, especially the ones that are already out there, and that's why I've tried to put many in this video, is so important. And the fact that they were able to go and get those interviews and share that is a really important part of making sure these places get shut down. And if I can just be one extra voice to one extra drop in the bucket to hopefully eventually burst the dam, let's do it. That's my plan. I plan to be a drop in the bucket, and I plan for the dam to burst.
But across the country, Sequel continued to run 27 other facilities where kids were placed for foster care, juvenile offenses, addiction, autism, or behavioral problems, often in mixed groups. Over the past year, we've been investigating conditions in every single one. Vice News sent Freedom of Information Act requests to 20 states that work with Sequel. 14 of those states sent us 15,000 pages of documents. We have licensing reports, we have internal emails, and we have inspections. These are from the last 3 years. And within these documents are hundreds of serious violations. We've read them all, and we've tried to spot patterns that are occurring between different facilities. One of the most troubling things we've found in all these documents is that Sequel fails to report time after time when it breaks rules, even though it's legally mandated to do just that. Facilities don't keep track of basic information about kids, and there are over 400 proven violations in these documents here of reporting or case documentation rules. What that means is that everything we have here, all of these documents, is probably just the tip of the iceberg. We're seeing violations across many different Sequel facilities. These range from unsanitary conditions, lack of staff training, lack of supervision by staff, to over 250 complaints of child abuse. About a third of those are fully substantiated by investigators. We counted more than 80 improper restraints, like the one that killed Cornelius.
They're fragile kids ripped from their homes and placed in facilities with a history of neglect. Why would you do that to them? What are they using to give Jay this amazing profit? Taxpayer dollars meant to help kids that are specifically allocated in the budget for behavioral health programs. That is the money that is getting contracted to Jay Boy's wallet. Why would the government continue to contract with these people after they've hurt so many children? Honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if there's connections that people have or networking or what, but it is ridiculous that the government is still contracting with these people. After everything that's come out through the troubled teen industry and a lot of different people sharing their experiences, whether specifically at Sequel Care or at another place, it is ridiculous these places still have government contracts with our taxpayer dollars. Fuck that, man.
I was horrified at what I saw.
Christy Johnson led an investigation by the Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program. In a report this summer, they documented appalling living conditions at Sequel's facilities in the state. Feces on the floor, blood on the walls, and concrete slabs with thin mattresses for beds.
The abuse was obviously widespread, far more than we realized.
It wasn't just one or two kids saying things.
No, we interviewed every single resident at each of the 4 Sequel programs that were willing to sit down and talk with us.
Sequel Youth and Family Services was established as a for-profit company that claimed to provide residential treatment facilities, behavioral health services, and foster care services. Sequel Care quickly expanded through acquisitions, taking over facilities that were previously operated by YSI and many others. However, their growth was soon overshadowed by some disturbing allegation. Multiple sources, including APM reports, TV10, NBC News, documented reports of abuse, neglect, and appalling living conditions at Sequel Care facilities. Lawsuits like the one filed by Tommy James Law became a reoccurring theme, with alleged victims seeking justice, as they should, in my opinion. Not that the legal system is always the best way to go about it, not saying it's always worth it, but if they do, they deserve the money. Good grief. Now, they allege that the Sequel Care Youth and Family Services prioritized profit over care and enabled abuse and neglect. There was physical and emotional abuse, with multiple reports documenting instances of physical and emotional abuse at Sequel Care facilities. Sources like APM Reports has a lot of these in detail. They're an incredible resource, and I'm going to have all of their articles linked as well. They've done a lot of work covering this. Reports allege inadequate living conditions, lack of proper care, and failure to meet the basic needs of children residing in Sequel Care facilities. Sources like WSFA, 12 News, and Montgomery Advisor provide examples of those horrible conditions.
Tristan says after he tried to run away from this facility, he experienced something the report documents, being locked in the timeout room for days.
They stripped me into nothing but my boxers, put a little tiny mattress in there.
When he needed to go to the bathroom, he says no one responded.
There I was banging and kicking on the door trying to get someone's attention. Nobody would come. So eventually I had to, it's kind of embarrassing, but I ended up having to use the restroom in my own breakfast tray.
All of these allegations came to a head when a child unfortunately lost their life because of improper restraints done by the probably very poorly paid people that were there and probably didn't know what they were doing and just killed a kid. And that's why it's so important that we have people that have the necessary certifications and licensing so that they don't do horrible things like that. This guy wanting to make more money should not have taken anyone's life. Already took the quality of life from so many children. In my opinion, it should not also take the life of a child, in my opinion. Because of these allegations, several Sequel Care facilities closed down around the country. Some of it was a combination, it seems, of financial difficulties and also the pressure of these abuse allegations. States like Oregon and Washington terminated contracts with Sequel Care after the investigations into these abuse allegations.
20-year-old Steve Kyorkis of Seattle knows all too well the place where Cornelius Frederick died, Michigan's Lakeside Academy. When he was 16, the state of Washington sent him to live there after already suffering the trauma of bouncing between 46 different foster and group homes in Washington state.
I'd say Lakeside by far was the worst placement I've ever been in.
Did you witness abuse in your time at Lakeside?
100%. I've been in restraints there. I've had incidents like that happen there. I personally have had a staff spit in my face directly to try to agitate me, to give them an excuse to restrain me.
State records show since 2015, Steve is one of about 160 hard-to-place foster kids farmed out across the country to states like Utah, Iowa, and New Jersey. Officials here say they couldn't find spots for them in-state. And many were sent to facilities owned by a troubled company called Sequel Youth and Family Services. Lakeside in Michigan was one of them.
It sounds like you're saying you felt like it was more incarceration than rehabilitation.
Exactly.
When I was working for Sequel Care Youth and Family Services a long time ago, it was when all of this news was coming out. I had left shortly after. And as this news came out, I was surprised by listening to all of the upper staff members not be concerned. I was incredibly upset and overwhelmed by all of this information because I wasn't at any of these facilities that this was happening at. Though I knew there were issues, I did not know how bad they were. And I was even more overwhelmed by the lack of accountability or desire to change. When I talked to my upper management about it, they said, oh, we'll just become a new company or change our name. No big deal. And though these companies are not technically the same company, when you bring the same people with you through every single step of the way, you're going to have the same core values, the same mission for all of them. And unfortunately, that seems to be profits over children. High profits, low quality.
Cars in the parking lot, but there haven't been any children at Sequel Pomegranate since July. Citing a pattern of recurring incidents, the state announced Friday it had reached a settlement agreement requiring the mental health provider to immediately relinquish its license.
They don't have any sort of security here?
Police have been called here more than 20 times in 2020 alone, and our investigation last year uncovered a number of violent incidents in which both teens and staffers were subjected to violence or abuse. Some children here reported being put in painful and improper restraint holds.
The fact that there have been that many incidents and that it was still going is definitely very concerning, but the fact that it's been checked out now is a relief that it's not going on anymore.
This young woman, now in her 20s, asked that her identity be withheld, but says she was a patient at Sequel Pomegranate more than 3 years ago. She went there on a referral from a psychologist after bouts with suicidal ideation, but left not feeling much better.
It was the constant threat of the, of the restraint. The constant threat of the restraint at that point, it was lack of sleep. They had taken me off of the medications that I needed, and refusing to allow me to call my parents to let them know what was going on.
The woman told us she was placed in a seclusion room at times. Her father says he now regrets the decision to send his daughter there.
The next iteration of the company was founded by good old J-Boy, the same guy involved in all of the other companies, acquired many former Sequel Care facilities. They rebranded as Vivant Behavioral Health Care, with some facilities adopting names like Brighter Path. However, a crucial detail remained. Key figures like the co-founder John Jay Ripley stayed on board from Sequel Care Youth and Family Services to Vivant Behavioral Health, according to citecrime.org, as well as my LinkedIn searches. This moved raised concerns about a name change being used to mask deeper and worse issues with the company. Sequel Care's physical presence has begun to shrink, finally, in my opinion. Facilities have closed around the country, as reported by Spectrum and APM reports. While some closures might be happening due to these financial issues and abuse allegations, Vivant Behavioral Health, as well as other subsidiaries, are continuing to take money from the government to operate these facilities. They're continuing to operate these facilities in my opinion, bad faith. Though the name has changed and they have technically changed the company, the key structure is the same. Not only is John Jay Ripley being a bitch in this one, but so is the new president of Vivant Behavioral Health, Brian S., who was the old vice president of operations for Sequel Youth and Family Services. Now, whether new government contracts have been awarded under these new names remains unclear. If you have more information about that, please also put that in the comments. I do have a list of the facilities that are still open under Vivant Behavioral Health and Brighter Pathways, brought together by Psychiatric Crime Database and Disciplinary Actions, a public service of the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. It's a really cool website where you can go into the database and see a lot of different information. I was looking specifically on their Vivant Behavioral Health and Sequel Youth and Family Services reports. It talks all about their history, but specifically here, you can see a list of the current and former Sequel facilities. Facilities are owned by Vivant Behavioral Health unless otherwise noted. We have several that are renamed Bright Path Montgomery under Vivant Behavioral Health, now owned or managed by True Core Acquisitions. We also have some that are no longer operated by Vivant or that are closed completely because of different allegations or financial issues, allegedly. Some were sold to special education and behavioral health service providers like News Story or Rite of Passage, which I would need to do more research in before I could say if these are, I don't know if Rite of Passage and News Story is kind of just like Vivant Behavioral Health and all of these other ones, or if it's not, I'm not 100% sure. So if you find any information on that, please put it in the comments below. And if you'd like me to look more into that, please let me know, and I definitely will. Now, as I do research on these behavioral health programs, it reminds me of something that YouTuber Drew Gooden said when reviewing mental health products for his YouTube channel.
Let's be real about it. As more and more people talk about mental health struggles, there are other people who look at that as a new market to target. It is an ever-growing demographic of people who are probably seen as easily exploitable.
And that's for America's about $80 billion behavioral healthcare industry. Fuck you, Vivant Behavioral Health. Fuck you. The story of Sequel Care exposes a system that failed vulnerable children and shows the dangers of unchecked greed. The fight for accountability and improved care for foster care needs to continue. They deserve better and need adults to advocate for them that care about their well-being. Some things you can do is report suspected abuse, contact the National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-422-4453. Also, you can hold your elected officials accountable. Use USA.gov to find contact information and let them know that you demand better care for foster care children. Hold your elected officials accountable. It's your money that they are sending to these companies in order to not treat these kids well, allegedly, in my opinion. These systems, in my opinion, need an overhaul. And I think that is a bipartisan decision that we can decide that kids need health and safety, and that should matter more than any individual company's profit, especially kids that are in such a vulnerable place as the foster care system. They need an overhaul, and we need to elect people that have real ideas for how to help real people. So call your representative, find other creators that have gone through the foster care system and some of their stories. I'm going to have all of the different stories that I've put in this video linked below. And I definitely recommend checking some of them out, giving them that support and helping to spread awareness for such an important issue. Also, share your own experience. If you or someone you know has information about these companies, please leave a comment below. We can't let these people keep getting away with it. It's crazy that the same person under a different company name can continue to reopen the same business and use the same facilities and continue on contracts. That is absolutely crazy to me. And in my opinion, allegedly seems to be a huge issue. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, send this video out to anyone you know that would also want to support foster care children. Until next time, heretics, remember to keep laughing through the apocalypse.